150th. Woo!
Woohoo, 150!
Happy 150!
Happy anniversary, Joan!
My first question for you is, do any of you still swim at all?
Yes.
Yeah! We all knew. That's a trick question. Let's see, the lawsuit. I'm always very curious about Cook. No, let's not bring up. Let's bring up Walt Stack. I have a question about Walt Stack as being supportive of you guys. Walt Stack was a member of the Dolphin Club. He started something called the DSE Runners, which had the Dolphin South End Club Runners, but it didn't have any affiliation with the clubs except it let in women, people with disabilities, minorities, everybody. And so that was just in Walt's thinking. He was a good left-wing commie. He would say, well, why wouldn't you be a commie, for Christ's sakes? But he was actually the only person that I know of that was truly imprisoned on Alcatraz, who then wound up swimming from Alcatraz later. That's true, isn't it? Yeah, at least that's what he told me. But Walt Stack and others who were supportive of the clubs and people, the things you had to jump through as early members, women members of the club.
Is there a question there, Joe?
Just start talking.
Well, yeah, Walt was absolutely wonderful, and he was by far the most outspoken male supporter. Most of the men, I think, were a little shy about articulating support for the women, even if they, in their hearts of hearts. For example, Farnsworth and I used to cohabitate, and incidentally, Diane Major is the first woman I didn't get in until a week or two later because she was legally married and I was only cohabiting with Farnsworth at the time. And anyway, whatever. But George came home one night and he said, well, we voted tonight whether or not to admit the women, and how do you think I voted? I said, oh, George, you little SOB, I know how you voted. You voted no, right? Yeah, right. So, I mean, that was, they any good male member was not going to publicly declare his support for the women. I can't think of anybody other than Walt who did. Wow. Eventually, Modesto had a fundraising dinner for us in his restaurant up at Ghirardelli. And even Gordon was ambivalent. And when we were doing the second Women's Golden Gate swim, everybody was getting together at my house, and Gordon came over and he told us, oh, girls, the weather's going to be terrible tomorrow, giant breakers, and the currents, it's just going to be terrible. You shouldn't do it. And of course, Joan popped up and said, I'm doing it. And so the rest of us followed suit, which was kind of how it was, because Joan was really the power behind the lawsuit. She was the power behind a lot of things. And Joanie, you knew Joan, so you could probably attest to that, and Ira, I'm sure, could. If it weren't for her, I don't know when women would have gotten in the club, because the rest of us were a bit intimidated by the whole thing. And we did not want to, as Jeff pointed out, we did not want to sue these clubs where our husbands and boyfriends and so on were members, because, we didn't want to mess up their gig. So it couldn't have been more important than them. So we did sue the Aerial Club, which was legally a non-starter, and the judge threw it out, of course. We didn't, as I look back, I wonder how many brains we had between us, but then Modesto recommended his ex-girlfriend, and he said, she's a good attorney and she's mean. And so we rushed to hire Sandra, and she got us in for sure. But we had to sue all 3 clubs. And eventually, I will tell you that the South End took the troublemakers, but all was not smooth going after we got in. We were still the same people. It was still the same circumstances, and there were difficulties over the years, particularly for Joan, because she would get in your face if you were doing something she didn't want or weren't giving her what she wanted, and so we had difficulties. But anyway, I'm talking too much.
No, it's wonderful.
Joanie, you want?
Wait, I think there's questions.
Oh.
Sorry, but at some point, could you tell us about the early women's locker facilities? You had some situation before the long broom closet that we had, right? But before that, can you
Well,
tell us?
we didn't have any facilities in here, inside.
When you were admitted?
When we were admitted, they hastily erected a little, women's locker room, and we were thrilled.
And that was down here.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, we were thrilled with it, and it was, some of the early Dolphin members probably remember, they had a real nice one because,
Oh, wait. We had a room about the size of these 2 tables
Exactly.
oh really, was it?
with
Looked pretty
a
good.
tin shower, small, and a hot water faucet that no longer works. There was a pair of pliers, and you would crank that thing. And you'd be in there, and a total stranger would come in, and you'd let her, because that could be you next time, trying to get warm.
And algae all over. Remember? Yes, we had a lot of algae. I slept a few times.
I
Yeah.
don't remember that
It
part.
was so
So when did you guys get a sauna then?
Well, there was a sauna in the Dolphin Club, in the boathouse for a while, and
took the
anybody
bathroom
could.
down.
And anybody could use that. It took a few years before we had a sauna, and then a bigger space, and then we flipped spaces, and what was the men's locker room is now the women's locker room. Not nearly as nice as this one, but. The thing I remember about Walt Stack is his motto, which was start out slow and taper off.
Walt was a phenomenon. There was an article about him in whatever was the major sports magazine at the time. He was nationally known as an athlete.
Yeah, Walt did. You can look this up on YouTube, but he did the very first Just Do It ad for Nike. And if you haven't seen it, look it up. And I shouldn't give anything away because it involves the clubs and base swimming and the Golden Gate Bridge. But it's absolutely fabulous. But that's Walt Stack, and the story really is like, I'm glad there were a few supportive men at both clubs, but
Yeah, and there was Ray Talavera. I don't know if anybody remembers Ray. Yeah, Ray was supportive. He was a good friend of Marilyn.
So how many women were there swimming at that point, would you say? I mean,
Well, it varied. The first women's Golden Gate Bridge swim originated out of the Jewish Community Center here in San Francisco, and I did not participate. I had some students, I was teaching at USF, and I had some students who volunteered with Lane Fodish at the JCC. And Lane and Katie Ha were the ones who started the first Golden Gate Bridge swim. And Cecile, who's not here today, was in that swim, I know. And I really don't know who else was in there. I don't think Marilyn or Diane or Joan or Trudy were in. But anyway, we didn't get in until the second women's gate swim. And that was one of the greatest days of my life. It was so much fun. That was the swim that Gordon told us, oh, don't do it, it'll be horrible. The sun was shining. It was just smoothly rolling breakers. And They did indeed. I mean, only women in the 70s would have allowed this, but they did divide us into groups. You know, you go with this vote, you go with this vote, and you go with this vote. But we did have a fabulous time, and it was so.
Talk this a little bit louder. I'm sorry.
Oh, could I talk louder?
It's his hearing, it's going.
So is mine. Yeah, so is mine. Well, it was just a wonderful day, and
Was that the Breakfast Club swim?
that was the Breakfast Club, and Phil Hunter was doing our tides at the time. He was the greatest tidsman, and the South End swims were always just on point for whatever the currents were doing at the time. And when Phil was gone, well, it wasn't the same. And yeah, we had a New Year's Day swim 1981. I think they pulled out 52 people.
Yeah.
Not always a bed of roses here.
Oh, I know that.
She swims more than anybody, let me tell you. She swims more than the rest of us women combined, I think. Era does.
I'm curious about the start of the lawsuit. Like, how did you women get together and decide that you wanted to?
Well, Joan Brown. She used to hang out with Gordon at the Dolphin Club, and she was really a good-looking woman, and she would put on her bikini, and she would hang out on the beach, and that was cool with the guys. But one day, she went to the Dolphin Club and knocked on the door, and she said, well, Gordon's on his way. I wonder if I could just come in. And they were like, no, your husband's not with you. No, you can't come in. And, ooh, well, like I say, you know, you didn't say no to Joan Brown.
So
what role
how did she bring you guys into that? Did she
Because
say,
Joan participated in the second Women's Golden Gate Bridge swim with a number of people from the Jewish Community Center, and I don't think Trudy.
One of them.
Hmm?
I was one of them.
You were one of them. Here was one Thank you. Yeah. Before, sure, none of us
I
were.
have a picture. I wish I would have been all of us.
Oh, do you? Anyway, so when it came time for the rubber to meet the road, it was like sign up as a plaintiff for the lawsuit. And so only 6 of us did that. There were more women who would have, but anyway, 6 of us did that. And Diane, whom you met, was one of them. And actually, I don't think our husband was at all thrilled that she was doing it. But anyway, so it took us 2 years. But,
2 years to get the plaintiffs?
no, to get in the club.
More than 2 years.
Well, it took a week to get the plaintiffs. It was like, those of you who wanted to join, sign here, and we did.
What's wrong
At the Tom Layton.
Can I ask a follow-up question on this first, real quick? Sorry. At the museum in the exhibit, there's some ephemera of a fundraiser to raise funds for the lawsuit. It's from like 75 or 77, but the lawsuit wasn't won until 82.
No, that's not true. The lawsuit was done in 76.
Oh, but it
Yes.
took until 82 to get in?
No,
They
right away.
76.
just an error?
Thank you.
So there was,
Thank you.
there were 3 lawsuits, and I believe that the date that we have, 1978, that's based on the city deciding which, and I believe, and maybe you guys can confirm this, I believe that Buck Delventhal, who was a longtime member here, was working for the city attorney's office at the time, and he's the one who told the board and City Parks and Rec, we don't have a case. We have to tell these clubs that they have to invite women. And there's an article in 1978 that says, September I think, that says that yesterday, City Parks and Rec voted unanimously that the clubs all across the city, including these swim clubs, have to allow the women in. So that's the 1978 date where that comes from. There was a 3rd lawsuit that went to the 9th Circuit that involved that same attorney. But because the women were in the club, that was really about a broader issue, which was, among other things, also attorney's fees, but also about the broader issue of whether the clubs had to become completely public or not, and not even have membership. But the women getting in was in 1978, and I think that was as part of a settlement of the 2nd lawsuit, where City Parks and Rec said,
So Diane and I became members in December of '76.
Thank you.
We
Then it was
became
76. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
76, and then everybody else joined in January, I think.
So the cases kept going?
Sandra, yeah, mm-hmm, yeah, kept it going.
Dave Kimball?
Yeah, to tag on to this, Jeff, can you just talk a little bit about Buck Delventhal's role in when he was city attorney in the city attorney's
You know,
office?
I just knew he did those kinds of things, but that was news to me. So,
Who wrote the
told us
opinion?
he did that, exactly.
yeah, that's
The
cool.
way that Buck was a friend, and so it's exactly how he would recount that, is exactly how he said it.
He was a South Ender, and
Yes.
he wrote the opinion for the city, that the city had to open the club for women. And he took a little brief from the men.
Thank you for pointing that out.
That's
He
interesting.
hung his button to brief on
Tom Layton. The early lawsuit came to the club. So in '76, one came, I know, to the Dolphin Club, and the president sent it to Tom Silk, who was our pro bono attorney at the time. And Tom read it and called and said, yeah, let him in. I mean, this is the law, let him in.
Yeah.
And the guy said, I'm gonna get a second opinion. And I think it was Frank, but anyway, and so Tom sent a bill that we're still looking for that gave his billable hours and said, you can pay me this much money, or you can name the women's locker room after me.
Hey, Tom Silk, I saw his obituary not that long ago. Yeah, terrific.
You mentioned something about like when I joined, you still had to go in front of the board, I think, and
Yeah.
you think, what the hell kind of club is this? But so what was that like for you guys when you did that early?
Well, we did up here. I don't know about you. Did you appear in front of the board?
Yes.
Oh, well, I didn't.
At the Dolphin Club?
Yeah,
Boy, you don't do it here.
They do.
No, you send in your $100.
Get out.
Yeah, we did it over Zoom even.
Wow.
And also,
we have-
you should have sponsored the joint.
Yeah.
Without
Yes, yeah,
sponsor,
yeah.
you couldn't.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I was curious to know, did Joan Brown ever ask anyone to model for her? Any of the swimmers? Did she want?
Oh, great question. I don't know.
Is Janet or Nancy still here? Maybe you guys have an idea. Nancy Lim is one of the two curators for the Joan Brown Show, and she's here with us today. So.
I don't think we know with certainty, but I doubt it, especially because so many of these swimming things were self-organized.
You know, I do want to say something about Joan's experience here at the club that was significant. And I mentioned this to Jeff, that Joan joined the board shortly after we got in the club, and she sort of rose through the ranks and she became the vice president of the club. And it was tradition then for decades for the vice president to move into the presidency, but the guys got together and they said, oh, we can't have Joan Brown as our president. Wow. We just can't, we can't live with this. So they elected one of their own to be the president. And when Joan found out about it, she was very, very upset and wrote a letter to Park and Rec, which was, for the clubs, from the club's vantage point, that was sort of the kiss of death because they leased the property to us, Park and Rec. So at any rate, she wrote a letter saying this club is still discriminating against women, and Mary Dake signed it, and I signed it, and we took so much crap after that. It was, I mean, nothing ever came of that, but it was, I think that Mary and Joan and I, we were just persona non gratas for years. And I mean, they hated us. And at one point I was running for the board. Oh, stupid, I was so naive, I was so stupid. So Bob Roper got they got a list of the club members and they called everybody and they said, do not vote for Lee Bender. We do not want her anyway. And so Trudy, who had by then, of course, joined the club, and she was a plaintiff in a lawsuit, she was on the board at the time, and she said, Lee, you know, they cheated you. Of course, you won that election, and they just said you didn't. And I was like, I know. But, you know, I was, like I say, stupid. But I really didn't want to be, you know, a part of what if they didn't really want me. So, unfortunately, I think I have not participated in the club in ways that my trajectory here would have been a little different. But anyway, I mean, that's how much they disliked us, and they disliked Joan. And I think it's really important to say this because it just wasn't all sweetness and light. You know, the women got in and that was great and they loved us and embraced us. It really was not like that. It wasn't. And when Joan died tragically in 1990, one of the board members was heard to say, I'm glad she's dead. I hate her.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's how it was for a long time. And that was a long time ago. That was over 20 years ago. But Joan didn't let it stop her. You know, she kept coming down, she kept swimming and dating.
Yeah, so talk about, on that timeline, Sharon Ann Kushinka became the first woman president in the South End, and was that in 82?
No.
I don't know.
I think it was a little later. It might have been 85
I don't
or
know.
85 or 6. Yeah.
But Dave, I mean,
so she made the vote that. So there's that timeline. And
Yeah.
She was, by the way, a really good president of the club.
Yeah.
yes, of course she
And
was.
but she wasn't anyone who sued the club.
She wasn't a troublemaker, and that's an important point.
Yeah.
Those of us who were the troublemakers, we took the crap.
Yeah.
And the founding women, you know, the early women were just didn't have to suffer the heat. And I often thought, you know, if I had this to do over again, I would not do it. But since then, I've thought, when I'm on my deathbed, I will be able to look back and say, I did one good thing.
Joanie and Aaron, was it similar at the Dolphin Club? You guys had a woman president in the middle of the 1980s too, didn't you?
Right,
I mean, when-
Katie Maloney, yeah.
Katie Malone.
She took a lot of crap.
You kind of touched on one thing. So of all three of you, the question to all three of you is, with that kind of condition, you know, that there were men here who weren't friendly, right? What were your feelings in terms of intimidation? Did you just say, go to hell, I'm doing this? Or were there doubtful times? Because you kind of touched a little bit on that notion. The intimidating factor of a strong, I would call him a weak male, but you know, a guy coming on strong to like, you know, not being welcoming. So feeling-wise.
The feeling for me was different than Lee or Joan because I came from Iran just like a few months before. Here I am meeting all these ladies who they are suing the Dolphin Club.
Louder.
Oh,
People can't hear you.
Yes. And I joined when I came to the club right after the lawsuit. I met a lot of men there, older people. They were not nice, especially to me because I was from Iran and I had a very thick accent. I still have, sorry, you know. And they really gave me a hard time. They hated me, but I just ignored it. I kept going and I learned in my life, you should never argue. Just keep going and you get to the point.
Lost, you know, in terms of what more she could have done for swimming and for art and teaching. She loved teaching.
How did the news of her passing get back to you guys, and how was it kind of made known about her passing? And
I really don't know the answer to that.
How did the clubs deal with that?
Yeah, I can't read. It seemed like everybody knew right away.
Yeah.
Do you remember that, Lee?
It's on the front page of the newspaper.
Yeah.
Was she hired? Did the troublemaker become then a hero
Oh, yeah.
after her death?
Well, you know, within the art community, I think she kind of always was.
I mean, among the club.
represented
She didn't become a hero here.
No.
No.
Ever, even in passing.
Well, she is now.
Yeah, I had a question. So, the movement of women that they did for the clubs, I'm wondering how that falls in line with how accepting the clubs were of people of color. Was that always the case that acceptable, or? I know this is a little off topic, I'm just curious.
Bylaws of the club, actually, we specified whites until after women were men. I believe that's the case.
Probably the same.
I can't remember exactly when that was dropped, but although I also believe there were actually, Bob Vardy has some information about this, and Pat Deneen also, that there actually were a few men of color members over the years, maybe like
They may have been Hawaiians.
I believe one was Chinese maybe, and one I believe was black.
Full of sparkles for me. She was so amazing. I just met her coincidence. She was not part of those ladies who they were seeing the Dolphin Club and after I joined, I saw her running on the beach, and I was in the same time, just before she goes to swim. And we introduced ourselves. I think she loved my accent or something. Immediately, she became friends with me. And then it was like month of December. She said, I'm going to do the Alcatraz swim, 1978. Could you join me? I said, I am not a good swimmer. I trained myself to swim. She said, no, you can't do it. So actually, that picture, if you see, she's with me at the fisherman's wharf, sitting in a boat. All the swimmers are behind us. And she's smiling, and she never said nervousness, nothing. So we get there, and she said, okay, it's time to jump. I said, really? We have to jump. And she jumped, and she started to swim to the start. Here I am, I have only one swimming cap, no goggles, no earplugs. I'm swimming with my leotard, all and she just like jumped. So I jumped. All of a sudden I am panicked. I can't breathe. Guess who came to help me? Tom Rice.
Oh, no. Oh.
Just like my angel. Come on the board and said, I'll stay with you all the way. So he stayed with me all the way to the finish. And I just want to say thank you, Tom. I appreciate you so much. Otherwise, I could never finish that swim. And then after the swim, I met Joan, and she always was very generous to me. After all that swim, we did 3 times in the flat and back before the Alcatraz swim. She took me to the restaurant in Canary, and we had a Mexican food and margarita.
Wow.
Then,
I never knew you did that.
and she invited me to her place. I was like, ladder with her art. She climbed the ladder and she came. And I still have no clue. She is a famous artist in the city. It's like, why she's doing
it? She did keep things in perspective, and I don't think I've told you guys this, but I went to an exhibition of Bay Area figurative artists in 1989, a big show of, a big deal at the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art, and Joan was there, and she finds me, and she could be talking to collectors, whatever, museum people, other artists, everybody was there, and we talked about, swimming and all that kind of crap, you just think, Jesus, that's great.